Two of the most famous cases with regard to cognitive impairment are the baby doe cases. One is the infant doe, and one is the baby Jane Doe cases. The first one, 1982, the infant doe case, occurred in Bloomington, Indiana. This was about a year after the Mueller case, but her case didn't last more than a few days, but had a long-lasting impact. Infant Doe was born on April 9th in 1982 and died on April 15th. This was another child who had Down syndrome, but in this case had a tracheoesophageal fistula, and this secondary issue had physicians split over whether they should have go forward with any treatment. The prognosis for this tracheoesophageal fistula is more serious than for the duodenal atresia, and it really depends on the severity of the fistula or how big the gap is. So infant doe had a generally small gap, and an early operation to close it probably would have given the baby about a 90% chance of success, or give the operation about a 90% chance of success. However, when it was discussed with the parents, the referring obstetrician, whose name was Walter Owens, emphasized that some people with Down syndrome are, quote, mere blobs, and that the lifetime cost of caring for a person with Down syndrome would almost surely be close to $1 million. So, infant doe's parents decided not to allow the operation. The hospital administrators and pediatricians disagreed with the parents' decision and contacted the Monroe County courthouse. The doctor testified before the judge that even if the surgery was successful, the possibility of a minimally adequate quality of life was non-existent because of the child's severe and irreversible mental retardation, and those are his words. So infant doe's father was a public school teacher, and he had worked closely with people with Down syndrome, and he agreed with the doctor and felt that these children never had a minimally acceptable quality of life. The judge held the hearing late at night in a room in the hospital. No one recorded it. There was no guardian ad litem appointed for the baby, and the judge ruled for the parents. The district attorney appealed the decision and lost. He lost at every level, and it was actually appealed right up to the Indiana Supreme Court, and all of the appeals failed. He then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court for an emergency intervention, but in the process, infant doe died. It was 7 years later, in 1989, that the U.S. Civil Rights Commission cited the infant doe case as a landmark case of prejudice against infants with disabilities. The doctor in the case wrote that he was proud to have stood up for what he and a large percentage of the people, again to use his words, felt were right, and he said that he was glad that infant doe had died in only a few days and with little suffering, and that he was glad that the parents were able to have another baby, a healthy child, which had the couple had kept baby doe, or if baby doe had lived, they would have spent so much time and effort taking care of baby doe that they probably wouldn't have had another child. These again are his words. So the Civil Rights Commission decided that Owens' evaluation of the situation was out of touch with the contemporary evidence on the capabilities of individuals with Down syndrome. So throughout this process, there's a lot of media reporting on the infant doe case, which prompted President Reagan to direct the Justice Department and the Department of Health and Human Services to mandate treatment for future cases. Now remember that President Reagan was adamantly opposed to abortion, as many Republicans are, and he had appointed the Surgeon General at the time, who was C. Everett Koop. And Koop had also previously written a book, in fact, about opposing the non-treatment of impaired newborns. So because the states and not the federal government define crimes like homicide and negligence, the Justice Department had to find an indirect route to be able to make this non-treatment illegal, and they found a way to do so. So what happened was the Justice Department interpreted non-treatment as a violation of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which has become an important piece of legislation in terms of people with disabilities in having access to therapeutic services. But in this case, it's a civil rights legislation that forbids discrimination on the basis of a disability. And this interpretation saw that these newborns were citizens with disabilities who would suffer discrimination against their federal civil rights if they didn't receive treatment. So originally, this piece of legislation was meant to only apply to adults and children with disabilities and not newborn infants. But the Reagan administration made that connection and made it so that these babies had to receive treatment. So what happened was NICUs had to post the legislation and that it had to be followed or it was a violation of federal law. They posted 800 numbers on posters so anyone could report abuses, including, just concerned nurses, disgruntled parents, ambulance chasing lawyers, crank callers, anybody who felt that there was an issue. What developed out of that was something called the Baby Doe Squads that were composed of lawyers, government administrators, physicians, and they were charged with investigating complaints. In 1983, the American Academy of Pediatrics successfully sued in a federal district court to block these Baby Doe rules. And while the suit ran, the Baby Jane Doe cases began. There was also at this time a Baby Doe hotline and Baby Doe squads that were ready on an hour's notice to rush to airports, fly across the country, arrive as a squad to do a surprise audit. And they seized bank records, took charts from physicians, and investigated all night. And they thought that what they were doing was saving the lives of innocent babies. At the time, these were referred to as blitzkriegs by the Baby Doe Gestapo, by many of the hospitals that knew of their existence or had experienced them coming in and doing these kind of raids. Eventually, because of the objections by pediatrician and the national press, the squads were called off. But, what was the effect of these squads? That they did, in fact, force more treatment for some of the infants, and they have documented that it was 6 infants who might otherwise not have received treatment, but did as a result of what these squads had done. Perhaps the most famous case is the Baby Jane Doe case. And Baby Jane Doe was born in October of 1983 in New York. She had several major defects. They transferred her to the NICU at the State University of New York Hospital at Stony Brook. And her case resulted in landmark changes in law for babies born with disabilities. Her parents had worked hard. They were lower middle class people. They'd been married for a few months when Linda became pregnant. The baby was typical size. She was 6 pounds and 20 inches long. At birth, she did have spina bifida. She had hydrocephalus. She had impaired kidneys. She had microcephaly, which is a small head, which is indicative of brain damage. Think of, most recently, we've heard a lot about microcephaly in the Zika virus cases, and almost always associated with a cognitive impairment. And, these multiple disabilities were traumatizing to the parent. She had an open sac on her spinal cord with the meningocele protruding prominently. Surgery was recommended immediately to minimize the impairment but to drain the hydrocephalus to perhaps minimize the level of cognitive impairment. When she was examined by a pediatrician, a pediatric neurologist actually, the parents were told that she would either die soon without surgery or she could have surgery and be paralyzed have a cognitive impairment and be vulnerable to continued infections of the bladder and bowel. He believed that she would never be able to achieve any meaningful interaction with her environment, achieve any interpersonal relationships, or achieve what the doctor at that time classified as very human qualities. The surgeon withdrew from the case. He didn't testify. After a lot of soul searching, the parents decided not to allow the operation to drain the hydrocephalus. They were acting on their understanding of the difference between extraordinary and ordinary treatment, disallowing surgery but allowing comfort care. So they allowed baby Jane to get food, fluids, antibiotics, ordinary care. Based on what they had been told, they assumed that she would die soon. 4 days later, she was still alive. A social worker said, reported that dad was in despair because baby had not yet died, and that, Linda, the mom, wanted to give the baby as much love as possible while the infant was still alive, saying, "We love her very much. That's why we're doing what we're doing." There was a famous news story that was broke at the time by Newsday. It went national, and there were numerous firsts associated, and this was the only story at the time that she was able to interview the parents. Baby Doe continued to survive, and as sometimes occurs, but although rarely in cases of spina bifida, her open spinal wound closed. So that's very unusual for that to happen, but it did. So baby Jane's case went to the courts. An advocate, a right to life advocate in Vermont, filed suit in a state court to force treatment of baby Jane. And over the next several weeks, the case went through the courts because everyone they had already known about the other baby Doe, where the baby died while it was in the appeals process. So they wanted to move this case through a little bit more quickly. So the judge had an emergency court hearing pretty quickly on October 20th, and a guardian ad litem in this case was appointed and was empowered to temporarily make decisions regarding baby Jane's medical care. So at first, they supported the parents standing. But then an interesting fact came to light, and having talked to the doctors and, the advocate, etc., they went to the medical charts and reviewed all of the documents in the medical charts. And what they found was that there was some inconsistency, where in the file it said that after surgery she would probably be able to walk with braces, and then it said that the measurement of her skull was 31 centimeters, which falls within the normal limits and is not indicative of microcephaly. So the indication that she probably would not have the level of cognitive impairment that they were anticipating was right there within the file. So after having all of this information, and after the inconsistencies, the case ended up in the appellate division of the New York courts, and the justices decided that the law left decisions up to the parents when a choice was available between two medically reasonable options. Interestingly, the previous rulings of the courts had required a medically reasonable option to be an option that was not only supported by evidence, but also in the interest of the child. And this new judgment contradicted those precedents. So this was well published across the newspapers, lots of publicity. But in this case, the federal government had started to act. The federal investigators wanted to look at baby Jane's medical records. The hospital was not happy about this. The hospital lawyer blocked the government from examining the records, was turned over to the Justice Department that sued the hospital. Ultimately, it was ruled that the Justice Department could not have the medical records, and that the parents had not decided against surgery for discriminatory reasons.